Welcome back to Beauty Marks Podcast, a space where we embrace our marks acquired through our journey. My name is Elizabeth Savion, and welcome back to another episode here at Hi Hello Labs in downtown Orlando, where they can help you with all production video needs, and their team is amazing. If you haven't already, make sure also to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. All of that helps us to grow this podcast, and also I want to hear what you're loving, what episodes you're really enjoying, what you're getting out of it, and I literally read all of them, and it means so much to me. On this week's episode, I am back again with one of my favorite girls, or ladies, as I would say, but she's like a youth. So like ultimately, I love Maria Fernandez. She is a mental health counselor, and she is specialized with trauma, family, and she has been a huge part of my healing journey, as well as just like a mentorship as a friend over the past few years. And we had an episode talking about dating. And so now we'll be talking about marriage and just divorce, things that we see in our culture today, questions that I have had, as well as a lot of you guys. So welcome back, Maria Fernandez.
Thank you for having me back.
Yes, now you got this.
Yes.
Very excited for today's conversation. I actually asked on my social media of some questions from a mental health counselor. Right. And so we're going to do a little speed round first before we start of just some overall questions, and then we'll dive into the topic. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So the first question is, what is the root of imposter syndrome? How do I overcome this?
Imposter syndrome is the feeling of, it almost feels like you're being a fake. It feels like you can go to school, you can achieve all of these things, and all of a sudden you're in your career and you constantly have this feeling of, oh my gosh, if people really knew how unqualified I am for this. And really a lot of that goes to our childhood and how we developed our self-esteem. Mm-hmm. It's doing a lot of work of, part of it is that understanding the context of your life and where some of those messages were given, that, you know, usually it's a message of I'm not good enough, or, oh my God, I'm never gonna, if people only knew, this would be, I'm just a big fake. And it's getting to a stage of acknowledging that that is what you're going through, and then beginning to look at, you know what, you are qualified for this. You are, you know, and begin to sort of disrupt those messages and really get to the truth of, one is, man, this is what I really believe about myself. This is not accurate. And where did those lies come from? And getting to a place of accepting yourself and saying, you know what? Yeah, somebody could do it better, but I'm here, and this is the best I can do, and this is what I trained for, and I'm just going to keep moving forward.
Okay. A follow-up to that, do you feel like you can eventually get rid of imposter syndrome, like in your stage in your life? Do you still like struggle with that?
I struggle with a few aspects of it, as far as, I'll give you an example. As we were talking a little while ago, I'm in my 60s now, and I'm in this world of social media and podcasting, and you know, all my friends are like, Maria, and I'm like, wait a minute, you know. I think about, am I really that good? Or I see all the younger women doing this, and I'm like, no, I'm too old for that. Or, oh my gosh, what? So there's all this negativity, but yet there's a space where I walk into and say, but this is who I am, and I have to be true to myself. And I have to be okay with where I'm at. So I do have the negative internal dialogue, but I also have my little internal therapist that says, oh, hold on. You know, that's not healthy. You need to come over here. And what do you have to give? And be open to giving what you have. Yeah. And now you're in your 60s. Now you're talking legacy. Now you want to bring other people to be healthier. You don't want them to have to struggle so long.
Yeah, I struggle with that, like the imposter syndrome, and I feel like that knowing where that came from helped me a lot. And there's just like a side note that I feel like the voices that I was telling myself was more like what I heard people say of me, that I started taking that in as like my insecurities. I was like, oh, I'm so insecure about this or whatever. But I feel like kind of doing it more and exposing yourself more to the uncomfortable places where you do feel like I don't fit in or I'm not, I feel like then it gives you that confidence too. Like, no, I belong here. Like, I need to walk in here like I do belong. And that's not to say that you're prideful, because that's different.
Yes.
Once like you start feeling like, oh, I need to be in the room, that's not what we're talking about. It's more like you feeling like I am capable. Like I do have the education for this, or I do have the experience for this. Like all of that helps in those things. Someone also had a question, which is a little deeper, which is how to stop hating yourself, how to not have an inferior complex and be more confident.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to the same thing. And I'm really big on understanding the context of your life. And the context why that's so important is because a lot of times we struggle with what we don't understand. So the first part of it is getting to the context of my life is understanding where did my self-esteem come from and where did all these messages come from? Of just really what am I getting out of this? What happened where I learned to literally loathe myself and to have all these messages, you're not good enough, you're not, so on and so forth. And then what happens is that our actions begin to reinforce that. And, we become what we believe we are, even if it's a lie. Or we become our experiences, even if those experiences were so negative. Then from there, we start to get our self-image. So I'll give you an example. If you went through childhood trauma and sexual abuse, you were sexually abused as a child, that child made up or decided about themselves how to evaluate that particular incident. Well, then I'm this and I'm bad. And then you keep reinforcing that. As an adult, that became your belief, even though it's a total lie, but you've never really addressed it. So you have to process that in order to get to this place. That whole negative, I'm sure a lot of times it attaches itself to depression. Depression is negative. Depression is always, it makes you sad. So your thinking in depression is always going to be negative about yourself, about everything around you. So it's not a easy 1, 2, 3. It's you need to get into therapy and start really working on the context of your life. How am I here, so that I understand the framework of how I grew up. These are the things that happened to me. And then begin to look for the patterns. Man, this voice came from here and this voice came from here. And I really accepted that as the truth. And then there's another stage, which is, how do I fight that? When your own body even becomes used to all those negative conversations and it becomes a part of you, it's beginning to take that apart. The amazing thing is that our brains were created in a way that we can create new pathways to understand ourselves and healthier pathways on how we want to see ourselves. We can do that. It's going to take some work, but you can do that.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that question, like, that made me sad, because I'm like, to hate yourself, that feeling that you feel can feel so real, because it comes with maybe shame, or it comes with a lot of like what has happened that has created this narrative for myself, So although this is advice, I would say this is not a substitute for the therapy that maybe someone needs to go to or to dig deeper into that, because there are some moments that even I have been, of like the depressive episodes, that I felt like I saw myself very differently. But I can say now, over time and a lot of healing work that still is I'm in, I've been able to work through that.
Well,
So
and the problem with that is when you feel that way, you can become very self-destructive.
yeah,
Where
self-sabotage, a lot
yes,
of that.
and you keep hurting yourself over and over,
Mhm.
and you think, but this is who I am,
Yeah.
and it creates this cycle where you're
Mhm.
like, man, I must be crap. I'm just
Mm.
crap.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you act that way, you behave that way, you
Mhm.
continue to just thrive in that place, and we weren't
Mhm.
created for that.
Yeah. I know that when things have been good for me, I have felt sometimes to like self-sabotage because I'm like, this is too good. This can't be good. Because like you're so used to the chaos in your life that the peace or like the stillness
Mm-hmm.
feels like not like it's like you don't feel comfortable in it. And that's crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you want and desire that peace, that like stillness, that like home feeling. But when you're finally like getting there, it
Mm-hmm.
naturally, like your natural instincts is like, let me do something that's like, to get the highs again or to get it's
I
Maria,
think
it's a
for me
process.
personally, and in all the trauma that I've been through, and I've
Mhm.
shared my story here before, but one of the areas is like I have been learning in the season of my life. There's a Bible passage that says, "Be still and know that I am God." Is trying to be still in a place where I don't have to achieve, I don't have to explain, I can just be in the presence of God in prayer and in meditating and really grounding myself to know who I am in Him
Mhm.
has been just such a place of having that relationship
Mm.
and getting to know myself deeper.
That's good. That's good. Another question is, how do you identify if you are suffering from functional depression?
Ask that again.
How do you identify if you are suffering from functional depression?
There's some really good like Beck's depression tests. There's things that we as clinicians can give to help you with that. That's really interesting because I've been seeing more of that where if you're finding yourself doing things like you're not connecting with anybody, you go home and you zone out, you watch TV for hours, you're not depressed, you're not anything.
You're like numb.
You're unmotivated, you're
Mhm.
numb, but you're not depressed. And a
Mhm.
lot of people that are functional, what did she call it? Functional
Depression.
depression is you can go, you can work, you can do the things you want to do, but then there's this huge shutdown
Mm.
where you're just completely very detached. And if you don't deal with that, it's eventually going to go into a full depression. But you can go a long time in that
Mhm.
functional depression state.
So
You
that's
just
more like very disconnected, feeling
very
like numb.
disconnected. You're numb. You don't do anything. Nothing
Mhm.
motivates you. You don't really think of anything. You're just there.
Mhm.
And yeah, no, you need
Mm.
to go check that out.
Okay. So that was a speed quick one. But any questions, I will also link the episodes that we've done. We've done some on codependency. I think we've done some on like depression, how to like be in touch with your body, on trauma work. So I'll put all of that in the show notes as well for you to like reference those episodes. And as well as Maria, like she has amazing tools that can help with that for any inner work. But on today's episode, we'll be talking on the topic of relationships leading more towards marriage and then the divorce, I would say epidemic, but it's something that a lot of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, like can encounter within the church and out. So, first, I want to say that I know that this is a topic that is hard for some people, and it's sometimes like, I know that I'm not married yet, but I have seen people go through this process, and it is it's a huge grief. There's so many aspects to it. So when it comes to the process of marriage, I first want to talk about what our generation sees as that, and then when it comes to like divorce, a big fear of this generation, of the people that I talk to in my space, is that like everyone gets cheated on in marriages. people get divorced. Like, what's the point of marriage sometimes, like even within the church, you know? And I am a huge believer in marriage, that it is a valuable thing, and God made it for us to, you know, not just have a family, because some people may not have kids, but it's just the companionship, the how you said, the legacy that you can leave within. And I still believe that that's out there, even though our generation has changed so much from like other generations before. But how do you see that conversation?
Well, I get it. I get it because right now, divorce is on the decline, but that's because people aren't getting married. So that's what's going on. There's just this whole fear going on about getting married. A lot of children were children of divorced parents and had to deal with blended families, and it just created a lot of trauma. So there's a lot of fear of commitment because they don't want to go through that. So all of that, and I do hear a lot of that, well, everybody cheats and everybody, no, not everybody cheats. But here's the problem with all of that. We were created for connection. We were created to connect. So how are you going to do that? And create, and probably the generation that is in their, 70s and 80s, marriage was a lifetime commitment. And so you could have kids and it gave you financial stability and so forth. But they didn't look at the whole connection of marriage and how that works. But I'm going to give you a few different examples. I noticed when I was dealing with couples whose fathers, like in Puerto Rico, there was a whole generation of men that went to World War II. And those men came back and raised their families, and nobody knew what PTSD was. After that, we had, other conflicts, other wars went over there. And it happened also for men that were in those eras of going to war. I mean, we know that now, but they raised their families, and those families didn't understand what's going on with dad. Like, he came back and nobody knew what any of that stuff was. So there was a generation that was raised by military men and women who had a lot of PTSD and were not taken care of. And that created a lot of havoc. So what happens? We found out that in marriage, a lot of what had happened was due to trauma. Trauma is what we work on now. Okay, well, it really manifests itself in a marriage. So a lot of these marriages that didn't work, a lot of these marriages that are broken, it's because people came into it with a whole lot of trauma, not understanding that. We are getting much more educated. Fortunately, millennials are very good about going to counseling. For the most part, they actually enjoy it. And I think there's starting to be a shift of, like I said, I have people that are dating, and you and I had talked about it, that are dating and are coming to see me while they're dating. Why? Because they want to have a healthy marriage. And we're kind of looking at, you need to understand yourself and then come into marriage. This is what a healthy marriage looks like. This is what a healthy framework looks like. There's John Gottman, the 7 principles for making marriage work. There's a lot of stuff out there now that you can get educated. You just have to do the work so that you can start having a framework of, this is what marriage looks like. Because yes, if you look around you, man, everybody cheats. No, not everybody cheats. No.
It's just the 5 people around you.
Yes. But not
It's
everybody cheats. And not everyone is unfaithful. And not everyone, there are good marriages out there. It's just, we always talk about the bad. I want to say and we're going to talk about it. I have gone through divorce. I know what that's like. And I've also had the blessing of being in a very stable relationship for the last 17 years. And for Raul and for me, it's been a a healing process for both of us to be there for each other and to, navigate blended families and how challenging that can be. But Raul and I have always been able to come to the table and say, okay, we're going to talk about this, and always been willing to do that. Plus the fact that he has to be a guinea pig for a lot of my marriage work. Yeah. What do you think about this? He goes, oh my God.
I know we should have him on here. Raul, what do you think about marrying a therapist?
He would love it. He has a bachelor's degree in psychology.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, he's a cop too. He's a retired cop.
He's a retired law enforcement. So, we have that whole NG in law enforcement. A lot of
everybody cheats, right? That's the
that was the whole. And no, it has to do a lot with trauma and with expectations and marriage. You got to work at it. It's a lifetime commitment. I can't get up tomorrow and say, everything's so great, Raul's, I don't have to worry about it. No, it's a very intentional connection that we do. It's very intentional. So, and there is a framework now that you can look at and say, these are some of the components that you should have in a healthy marriage.
And can we talk about that?
Yes. For example, creating love maps. John Gottman talks about creating love maps. Well, a map is a direction, right? So creating love maps is, what's your connection time? What are the things that you guys do to create love for each other? What are the rituals that you do? So Raul and I, whoever gets up in the morning makes coffee first, and we always sit down and we have a conversation. We try to, at least, we can't do it every day because of our schedules, but at least 2-3 times a week, we're going to have dinner together. And when we have dinner together, we talk. How was your week? What's going on? Hey, did you look at this? Or how are you feeling about this? Or right now he's grieving. He lost his son. And it's been a process where I check in every so often. But we have these rituals that we do where it's connecting. Okay, we're intentionally connecting. And when couples stop connecting, that's when they start to pull apart. Connection is so important. Having those intimate conversations. Hey, what do you think about this? Or how have you been feeling? And we even go, we try to do this every so often. I'll ask Raul, are you happy? And I don't mean happy like,
do you still like me?
No, but some people take that word happy like, oh, God wants me to be happy. And, that's very superficial. It's, are you genuinely happy? Like, is there any, or I'll ask him, is there anything that I haven't been doing that you would like me to do? And we'll talk about it. And he's funny because he's like, no, you're great, everything's great. I'm like, yeah. And then I'll say, why aren't you gonna ask me? He's like, no, I'm fine. Like, no, I don't
have anything to work on.
But we talk a lot about about checking in with each other. Are we okay? Are we good? And creating those experiences, those moments. So now we've decided we do walking trails. So we've been looking more for walking trails.
Nice.
And that's really nice. It's whatever is important to you that you're creating those memories in the relationship. It's creating another one that they talk about, because there's 7 areas that Gottman talks about. Creating fondness and admiration. Looking at that person in your life and saying, wow, I really admire when you do this. Or looking at the connection rituals and really, really paying attention to that person. Wow, look at what you've achieved. There used to be this mindset of, wow, why am I going to thank him for working? He should work. Why am I going to thank him for helping out with the kids? He's the father. No, it's in the spirit of being grateful. I always tell Raul, thank you for being such a great provider, for always, making sure that everything is taken care of. I don't want anybody to compliment my husband more than me.
That's true.
He's not going to hear good things about himself more from anybody else than me. I'm going to make sure that I am the one there doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And he does the same thing for me.
That's good. Yeah.
Very important.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always aware of, you know, he needs to know how I think about him.
Mm-hmm. Because it's like you can expect like that person knows. Because like, oh, you know, like that you're so, but it's true. It's like, but then at work, if you're always getting applauded for certain stuff that you're like, oh, look, she doesn't even recognize me. Or she doesn't even see me. Or the opposite. Right. It's like, oh, I'm like invisible here.
Yes.
You know, which you hear that a lot in marriages over time.
And stay-at-home moms right now is a really big thing. Yeah. So men are like, yeah, my wife's a stay-at-home mom. And then they go to work and they're like really admiring the businesswoman. It's like, no, you better be really clear about what you're doing here, because it's a lot of work to be a stay-at-home mom and to raise these children. And, you know, it's a real commitment. So that's really important. Turning towards each other, always turning towards each other. Making sure that that I'm always connecting to you instead of turning away. And I'll give you an example. Conflict will come and situations will come. Are you gonna pull away from each other, or are you gonna look towards each other? We gotta work through this. Being able to do that is really important. Accepting influence. So my opinion is valuable, your opinion is valuable. That's really important. There is solving problems that can be solved, and guess what? There's going to be some things that you just can't solve it. I'll give you an example. Difficult mother-in-law. Oh my God, terrible. You're never going to solve that. How are you going to change? You're not going to solve that. So why are you going to keep fighting about that? It's not solvable. So figure out a way how you're going to navigate that. Overcoming gridlock. So gridlock is that place of we are in deep conflict and we're in gridlock. We're never going to be able to do that. You have to be able to do that. There's something that they call bidding for connection. In other words, not all couples who argue a lot are dysfunctional. Some people are they're just that way.
Yeah,
right?
Like they bicker.
They bicker or whatever. But the trick is, how quickly do they come back together? How quickly do they do what's called a bid for connection? And a bid for connection can be just as much as me doing this. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Versus, don't touch me. I can't stand you right now.
My recovery time, like when I get in an argument with someone, I need space. Like I can't just like go and just like pretend. Some people are quicker with that.
Yes.
Is there like a healthy gate, as long as like there's not built resentment? Is that like the goal, that it's like
as long as you communicate, hey, look, when I, and again, we were talking like meta emotions.
Yeah.
How do you think about emotions?
Yeah.
You already know that when you're upset, you need a time out to go process. You can't deal with it in the moment.
Yeah.
Then you let them know.
Yeah.
You need to give me a space. Now, normally we say 20 to half an hour at least. If it's ensued in heavy conflict, because your blood pressure goes up and you start to flood. Flooding means you have all these emotions going on. You don't even hear straight. When that happens, you need to stop. You need to take a break. Half an hour. Minimum. But you do tell you, listen, I need a break. After that half an hour, if you're not done yet and say, look, I can't really talk about it, then you schedule. Let's talk about it tonight or tomorrow morning. You let the other person know we're going to deal with this, but let me calm down and we'll talk about it tonight or tomorrow morning. You have that expectation. It's all about just communicating. We don't all manage things the same way. I like to resolve things right away.
Okay.
Raul's not like that. You know, he needs some space. And I've been learning that space is also good for me.
Yeah.
So, and then probably the biggest one is creating shared memories, creating that time together. I'm going to tell you, when people age and I see couples where the husband is taking care of the wife who has Alzheimer's, or the wife who's taking care of the husband who has Alzheimer's, and you're like, oh my God, how could they do that? Trust me, there is a memory bank of my young wife, of seeing her with the children, of they've had this shared meaning that has connected them for life. And that is the beauty of marriage.
That is beautiful. Because it's true. It's like you see couples that it's like they're literally to the end of days. That it's like they literally, it's like they go on walks. I think that's so cute. Even our generation, as much as like we see, right, the divorce and stuff, the videos that go viral on social media are so cute of like older couples that are like together playing, or like they're just like walking, or they're dancing together, because people are like, oh, like all the comments are like, oh my God, I want that. Like, like crying in singleness, like, because it's true. It's like we all desire that, because I think that the beauty of marriage, and I love how you said it, it's not only, it's the part of like you to live a long life of connection with someone, to like genuinely take care and work and take care of each other, and be there and have that love.
It will be the hardest thing you've ever done. It will. Marriage will be the hardest thing you have ever done. It will be the most rewarding. It will be the biggest selfless thing that you do, as far as loving someone. This is the big one. Loving someone the way that they need to be loved, and for that person to learn how to love you in the way that you need to be loved. Raul and I had a little situation not that long ago. And I was like, but I need this. I know you love me, but I need this. I need you to do this for me. And he was like, okay. I always look at looking at your husband, your wife, with that positive perspective that her heart and his heart has the best interest for me. It is not my intention to get up in the morning and hurt you.
Yeah.
And all of those things matter. How you talk to each other. And like I said, no one should treat you or your spouse any better than you treat each other.
But where does the quote that says like the people that hurt you the most is like the person that you like marry? Like the person that knows you the most. Is it because of how vulnerable or intimate you get in stages of your marriage?
Yes. But that's not really accurate either, because we do have an ability to forgive, to get back up. I mean, I have seen couples where I'm like, oh, I don't know if they're going to survive this, with all kinds of stuff, infidelity, all kinds of stuff. And not only do they survive it, but they turn a corner and they have a different marriage. Of course, it's a long haul, but they have a different marriage. So it's really difficult, but it can be done. And then I'm gonna use this as a caveat, because I know we're gonna talk about a little bit about divorce. Is that sometimes you just can't survive it because the other person isn't willing, and you can't make somebody do something they don't want to do.
And how has that journey looked like personally, but also of what you've seen?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna ask you this: when somebody comes up to you, and because you're dating right now, and let's say he's, what's your age, 31, 32, and tells you he's divorced, what comes to mind when you hear that?
To be honest, I would date someone that's been through a divorce. I'm open to that. That's not.
But generally, what comes to your mind?
Okay, what happened? Like, who? Like, how long? Like, are they okay? Because it's like you don't know because I'm gonna be honest, in the dating space, I have seen on the dating apps, this is real, but there were some people that I know that got a divorce, right? Like last year, that were still in the process. And when I got on the apps, they came up on my thing, like on my slide. And the first thing I thought was like, sir, what are you doing here? Because I know them. Like, I know them that they just got a divorce. So I think for me, I do see the heaviness of like, that's like a grief process. Like, you just got a divorce to be dating so quick. like that's a concern, you know? So I would say like those are the questions that I ask myself is like how long, what happened, have they worked through some things? If they have kids, that's a whole nother process. But I feel like I don't see it as like maybe as I should of like that it's a huge mourning, you know?
Yeah, but there's a lot of questions that comes to your head about
Yeah.
what happened, did you work on it?
Yeah.
So there's this thing that you start to process when you hear the word.
For sure. And I think that for guys and for female and males, like when they go through the process, I know it's probably, I'm not sure. That's a question for you. Is it the same of the divorce process or it just depends?
You like mean for men and women? Or?
Yeah, for men and women when it comes to the dealing with it.
Oh my gosh. First of all, divorce is a death. Mm-hmm. It's a death of a relationship. It's a death of what you thought was going to be. Mm-hmm. There's so much attached to it. Mm-hmm. For some people, it's betrayal. Mm-hmm. It's a death and nobody died. Mm.
Like they're living out there.
The relationship died, but nobody died.
Yeah.
I'll never forget when I was in such grief after a divorce. I was getting my nails done at this shop, and this lady, she was listening to my story, and she goes, "Honey, I'm so sorry you're going through that." She goes, and she started to tell me she was grieving the loss of her husband, who she'd been married to for like 40-something years, right? And she looked at me with tears in her eyes, and she said, "I don't know if I could do what you're doing." She goes, "My husband loved me. He died, but I don't have any rejection. I don't have any of that." And, you know, as I was listening to her, I put it in perspective and I said, "Hey, this is awful." You know, I'm like grieving and making judgments about myself, feeling like a failure. And then I had a theological perspective through the church, you know, God hates divorce. You're never, and that really, really, really sent me spiraling. That was just so much shame about, oh my God, I failed. I couldn't make this work. There's something in grieving of a divorce. It's called disenfranchised grief. And disenfranchised grief it's sort of a hidden grief where you're grieving a divorce, but people don't really help with that because you don't see it. There's not a dead body. You're not having a funeral. No, you're going to court and you're trying to figure out how, if you have kids, you're going to go co-parent, and what are you going to do financially? And divorce is devastating. And it's so, so hard. And then to complicate matters, sometimes you're getting a divorce because there's another person involved and there's infidelity, and now that person is living with that person and I'm over here by myself, and that's not fair because there's another relationship going on. And I'm just going to be honest. Do you honestly think that a healthy relationship is going to come out of breaking up a family? No. It doesn't work. Yeah. It doesn't work.
It's temporary.
So there's a grief process. Yeah. There's grief. There's divorce care. It's free. You can literally go anywhere to do that. You've got to spend time on yourself. And guess what? Whether you want to admit it or not, you were a party to this divorce, and you're going to have to own your junk. It doesn't become any more about whose fault it is. It becomes about clearly seeing these are the things that I need to take ownership for. Otherwise, you're going to drag that into the next relationship.
Did you spend like time single when you got out of a divorce, or did you feel like you were in still the spiral state? Because I've seen both, you know, because everybody processes it very differently, you know, of how they go about it. Do you feel like that for you was something that you like had the tools for, or you feel like you're never really ready for something like that? Like
you're just not. You're not
until
ready.
You go through it.
Until you go through it. There's no way to know how to navigate that because it's not in your. Oh, I'm going to get divorced. And this is, you know, you don't go into it
Yeah.
with that. You go into it with, I'm going to make this work, or I'm going to do this,
Mhm.
or I'm going to do that. And you're constantly in that mode
Mhm.
of trying to do that,
Mhm.
you're always in fix it mode. You don't
Mhm.
know until you're there, until either the person leaves or you leave. And then you're like, okay, how am I
Mhm.
doing this?
Mhm.
And both sides. If you were the one that wanted to leave the relationship, and I've had that. I've had people come in where one person will say, "Can you please explain? I can't be here anymore. I'm done with this."
Mhm.
And the other person like, "No, I'm gonna fight it." And I'm like, you can't force somebody to be there. This
Mhm.
person is done. And
Mhm.
there's a huge amount of grief.
Mhm.
Huge amount of grief.
Mhm. And what does the process usually look like?
Of grieving,
Yeah.
it's usually the same of all the grief. Denial, this isn't really happening,
Mhm.
you know, and you start to try to navigate that.
Mhm.
It's all the stages of grief that you go through when someone dies.
Mhm.
You know, you go through depression,
Mhm.
you go through shock. Is this really happening? Are you
Mhm.
serious? Like,
Mhm.
especially if you're young, like
Mhm.
22, 23. Am I really going through this?
Yeah.
You know, is this for real? Or if you've been married for a long time, when Raul retired in
Mhm.
law enforcement, the majority of his friends, after they collected their pensions and did all of that, almost all of them ended up in divorce.
Wow.
Why? Because for all those years, they were working, 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 working. And they thought, oh, we're going to be happy now. But you never worked in the whole marriage. And now you're going to be alone. And guess what? We don't even like each other. Like, I don't even want
Mm.
to talk to you.
Mm.
This is a disaster. And they end up in divorce.
Mm.
It was amazing how many people um, in retirement age are now going through divorce
Yeah.
because they thought we're going to be empty nesters. That's another thing.
Mhm.
Empty nesters, divorce.
Yeah. Because they
Why?
don't know how to tolerate at that
No.
point
Well, the only
or
reason
work
they were
through.
staying together was because of the kids.
Yeah.
And okay, now you did that. Now what? You
Mhm.
never bothered to really work on the marriage and the relationship. You don't even know who she is anymore, or she doesn't know who he is anymore.
Yeah.
Because it goes both ways.
For sure.
So, but yeah, after you go through the bargaining, through the
Mhm.
depression, through all the stages of grief, then you start getting to a place of acceptance.
Mhm.
And acceptance isn't about it's okay. Acceptance is I got to deal with this.
Mhm.
What did I learn from this? What did I not? What do I need to take ownership for?
Mhm.
What are the traumas in my life that came out in this marriage? Or was I in a domestic violence situation? Was like all of those things you have to process before you try to go back out there and deal with
Yeah.
dating again.
Because correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like it's kind of in the way of what you don't heal. It like continues to grow within that relationship, but then it just continues after that.
Oh,
Like it's like a
sure.
breakup is one thing, but I know that the divorce part is like how you said, it's like dealing with the rejection, dealing with whatever situation it is. And some people maybe didn't have that like I know a few people that like they got married very young, like at
Mm-hmm.
19, 20, and then they're like a lot older in their once the kids are out, so then they're like
And they're different
you
people.
yes
And they didn't stay connected.
yes, and then it's like you don't marry the same person that at
But
that
you know
stage.
that's not so uncommon because we all grow. We all
Mm-hmm.
evolve.
Mm-hmm.
It's staying together in that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But divorce is just so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And, people are there for you when someone dies and, oh, you're a
Mm-hmm.
widow and, oh my God. And
Mm-hmm.
man, but when you're going through a divorce, there's just almost still this stigma and you really don't want to talk about it, but you want to talk about it. And it is just really, really hard. So then you get involved in a new relationship and you haven't quite healed from that. So guess what? All of that trauma is going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to see things that are not there.
Mm. So
And
the
assume things.
self-sabotage.
And you have to be self-aware enough to be able to tell the other person, look, this is not negotiable. I went through this. It's not that you can't be triggered. It's to be able to explain it. I went through this, and when this action occurred or this behavior, it reminds me of this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know that, you're just going to fight.
Yeah.
Your anger is going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how were you able for you to work through that?
A lot of therapy, for sure. A lot of being by myself.
Like figuring out like you again.
Yes.
In the process.
Yes, there's a shifting that goes on from being married to being single, and what do I want that to look like. And it's very challenging. It's very challenging. It's another level of trauma. Divorce is another level of trauma. And it became everything. I had to deal with my childhood. It's really what pushed me into trying to get into
mental health, right?
Into mental health, yeah. Into counseling.
So that pivoted you into helping other people.
Because then I found out, man, there's so many things I didn't know about myself, and I didn't know what trauma was, and I didn't know what abuse in childhood would do, and how I'd respond to that, and why did I attract this kind of man, and just all of that I had to work through. It took a long time.
Yeah. Now you're helping couples with that. Yes. So look at that.
Yes.
You're like the redemption story for sure.
Well, that's the heart of God.
Yeah.
Is to redeem us.
Yeah.
I'm definitely, by the grace of God, not the same person I was before. And, that's for the better. But there were very many dark moments, and my heart goes out to people that have to go through it, because it is very hard. It's very difficult.
I know we shared a little bit about like the divorce process, but also like the healthy marriage part, and that's why like we started off on that note, because I know that a lot of us don't go into marriage thinking that it's a divorce is going to happen, but I know that some people, and I know some people that listen to this podcast also like have gone through that or are going through that. So I will provide your information as well as I know how you said the groups that are available. But do you have any last like tips, or how can we either prepare if we're in it, work in having a healthy marriage? Like the last thoughts on that.
It's making a decision to be very intentional in the relationship. And being mindful of doing an inventory. Where am I in my marriage? Where are things at? And then being very proactive. But the person you have to start with first is yourself. We're very good at, my husband needs all of this, or my wife needs all of this. No, you need to start it yourself. And it is the reward that you're going to get for the work that you put in it is beyond words. To be able to have a safe connection, a loving environment, to share your dreams, your hopes, to share your pain, to have your person is a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a choice, I think, because like even though you said your person, I'm like, I know that some people can be like, you see, there's someone, but I think it's still a choice.
Yes, it is a
because
choice.
Even I used to believe of like the whole thing of like the one, that it's like God has one person, but how about if you've been through a divorce, right? Like, it doesn't mean that you've married the wrong one. Like, it's like so many things that go into that. So I feel like if you are on the single side, it's preparing and working on yourself. I think that's the best gift that you can give for yourself, because also like you don't know how the future, you don't know when, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, it's the preparation work. And if you are in one, then it's like the intentional work, just like with anything. It's like you put in the work to see for your fitness or for your health or for your career. It's like you put in the work and you see the reward. I see the same as like relationships. Like, so when people say like, oh, it has to be so organic, like it just has to be like, that's my twin flame and we just like get each other. I'm like, I think there's still some intentionality.
That's a fallacy.
I agree.
There's no such thing.
I agree.
You have to work at it.
Yes.
I mean, what Raul and I have is because we work at it.
Yes.
And nothing, things that are worthwhile in your life, you've always worked for.
Yeah.
You know, you
For
go in
sure.
there and you're like, I'm going to put in the time. Well, you have to do that in your relationship, because I'm going to tell you, one day work is going to finish and you're going to get old and you're going to be in your senior years. And trust me, in your last days, it's not going to be about how much money you made. It's not going to be about any of that. It's going to be about the people in your life and those relationships.
Yeah. We are relational beings. And I feel like as much as we can sometimes get sidetracked with things, like it'll always go back to like the fundamentals of our relationships. Because when you look at people at like how you said, like their old age, when they're like, it's all about the small things, like who I have around me, the peace that I feel, the things that I feel like I accomplished and I felt like full in, you know, versus the materialistic stuff, you know, that we have. So I love how you shared that. So thank you for being on the episode and on the podcast. Again, you always share so much wisdom. And I know that you have encouraged someone that is either on either side. And even for me, because I know that one day, if that's God's plan for my life, because that's something else too, which I didn't know. Marriage is not promised to everybody, which is a lie I believed when I was young. So I was raised in like the very, you know, Pentecostal culture that it's like your whole goal is like to get married. That's actually not promised to us to get married. So even if you get married, there's no promise that you're not going to, if let's say they pass away or if something happens, to get married again. Like there's no promise to that. So I feel like the best thing that I have for myself is to have the peace to know that it's like I will steward where I'm at until that, if that, you know? And so my contentment comes, because even aside from having a partner, I feel like what helps me as a single person is the community that I have, which is connection with my friends, my family. Like I feel fulfilled in that until that. So if you're on the divorce side, cultivating that.
You know, my mother told me the story about a friend that she had who had no husband, had no children, but her girlfriends took care of her. She was sick with cancer and she had passed, but her girlfriends were there with her throughout the whole thing. So community is so important. And, you know, taking care of the single people and the married people and our seniors. And we just have to be more intentional about loving better.
Yep. That's true. You heard it here first. I will put all your information down below. Thank you for stopping by Orlando.
Yes.
Being in our streets, and just really excited for all the things that you're doing. And I know the lives that you're impacting in Ocala. Yes. And she also does virtual. So if you want to.
I do virtual. And then now I have an office, which is, you know, face to face. It's a really nice little cozy office.
Yes.
You want to come out to Ocala, make a day of it.
Yeah,
I do couples work usually on the weekends. I work some schedules out, so I'm pretty flexible with that.
Yeah, thank you.
My heart is for couples and to help them in their journey.
Yeah, and the people that have, so like a lot of people I know have gone to her for premarital, and she don't play. She does not play. She will ask the questions. Yes. But I feel like that's what you need. You need someone that, you know, like makes you think about those deeper questions and prepare, because it's like how you said. And I love hearing from people that have shown in their life that they have a healthy marriage, because that's me as like a single person. I have honestly been so intentional about like seeing the goal relationships around me that are healthy, because I feel like when I was in that view of like, oh my God, everybody's cheating, everybody's like you're literally like, oh my God, I don't want this. Like I literally remember the time that I was like, I don't know if I want to get married if it's like this, because of the people that I had around me. But now I can look and look at couples and I'm like, that would be amazing to have. And like I want something like that. I know it's possible. So I think that's another key of having healthy couples around you that you can learn from, that you can prepare and mentor you through that.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this week's podcast episode. Make sure to share this with a friend, subscribe, and let me know what you thought about this episode. And I will see you guys next week.